Well, howdy, y'all. Welcome back to Blue-Eyed Diaries, where we take a hard look at history and stories that make you stop and think. Today, we've got a tale that'll stick with you long after it's done. A story of loss, betrayal, and the fight for justice. Now, before we get started, don't forget to hit that like button, leave us a comment, and subscribe for more stories that'll make your heart ache and your mind wander. All right, y'all, settle in for a spell, 'cause this one's a doozy. The bombing at Blue Ridge. Mara's small hands trembled as she pressed the wet blanket tighter around her face. The heat was unbearable, a suffocating force that swallowed her family's home. She had grown used to the droning speeches her parents gave from the loudspeakers, talks about freedom, justice, and how the Browns treated the Blues like animals. But tonight, fear hung heavy in the air. Gunfire erupted, loud cracks shaking the walls. The adults whispered about the police outside, their voices frantic. Mara's little brothers, Eli and Jonah, clung to her, their wide blue eyes reflecting the flicker of a lone candle. Then came the explosion. A deafening roar shattered the night. The ceiling caved in as fire and smoke engulfed the room. Mara screamed, pulling her brothers under the wet blankets her mother had thrown to them. "Stay down," she gasped, coughing as acrid smoke filled her lungs. But the fire grew too hot. Crawling through the smoke, she dragged Eli and Jonah toward a shattered window. Cool night air teased her face as she gasped for breath. "Eli! Jonah!" she cried, reaching back for them. But they didn't move. Their tiny bodies lay still beneath the blankets. Mara choked on her tears as strong arms pulled her from the flames and placed her burnt hands in handcuffs. Alan Walker stood frozen on his porch, watching as flames devoured his neighborhood. The fire leapt from house to house, roaring like a beast unleashed. Alan had voted for the new mayor, Blue Ridge's first blue leader, hoping for change, but tonight he stared in disbelief as the mayor's decision to drop a bomb turned his home into a war zone. For months, Alan had been frustrated with the family down the block. They were loud, defiant, and refused to compromise. But this was unimaginable. Children had died. Alan had seen their charred bodies pulled from the rubble. His own home was reduced to ash alongside his neighbors. Alan clenched his fists, tears streaming down his face. He felt betrayed by the mayor, the police, and himself. How could he have wished for the destruction of his neighbors, no matter how difficult they were? Officer Garrett stood at the edge of the wreckage, his stomach churning. He had joined the force to serve and protect. Tonight, he had watched as his colleagues dropped a bomb on a house filled with children. Necessary force, his commander had called it, but Garrett couldn't see the necessity in dragging the burnt bodies of toddlers from the ashes. He had wanted to intervene to stop the madness, but chaos reigned. Gunfire, flames, and shouted orders drowned out reason. Now, all he could do was watch as families mourned. Garrett's hands trembled as he removed his helmet. The Blues in the crowd glared at him with hatred and despair. He wanted to say he was sorry that he had tried. But what good were words now? In the days that followed, Blue Ridge became a city divided. The Blues directed their fury at the mayor who had betrayed them and the police who had turned their neighborhood into a battlefield. The Browns, though shaken, largely stood by the authorities, viewing the tragedy as a necessary evil to maintain order. Mara was placed in foster care, haunted by nightmares of her brothers' faces and the heat of the fire. Alan spent his days sifting through the ruins of his home, wondering how to rebuild. Garrett left the force, unable to reconcile his conscience with his badge. The tragedy became a symbol of systemic injustice, a grim reminder of how the Browns treated the Blues as expendable. The mayor apologized, but the wounds he had inflicted were too deep to heal. And so, Blue Ridge remained scarred by fire, by loss, and by the unshakable truth that some lives were deemed less valuable than others. Now, before y'all go, let me tell you, this story of Blue Ridge is based on a real-life tragedy. Back in 1985 in Philadelphia, the police dropped a bomb on the home of MOVE, a black liberation group led by John Africa. 11 people lost their lives, including 5 children. 61 homes in a predominantly black neighborhood were destroyed. 2 people survived that horrific night, Ramona Africa and 13-year-old Birdie Africa, whose birth name was Michael Moses Ward. Ramona served 7 years in prison on charges of riot and conspiracy and continued her work with the MOVE organization after her release. Birdie Africa tragically passed away in 2013 at the age of 41. It's worth noting, no bombs were ever dropped on groups like the Ku Klux Klan, despite their history of terror and violence. That's the stark truth of systemic injustice. Here at Blue Eye Diaries, we tell these stories to make you think, to challenge what you know, and to shine a light on the truths that often get swept under the rug. If this story moved you, don't just let it sit in your heart. Let it move you to act, to question, and to learn. And as always, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. We've got more stories coming that you won't want to miss. Until next time, y'all, thanks for listening.